Okay, the official welcome. Welcome to this webinar. We are so excited to be here with the North Carolina Main Street Rural Planning Center. We have an expert panel here, and we're going to learn so much. The panel is going to be moderated by Liz Parham, who is the director of the North Carolina Main Street Rural Planning Center, and by Paige Hicks. Paige, give us a wave. Liz, give us a wave. Liz is a Main Street program specialist with the Main Street Rural Planning Center. And I'm going to be quiet. We're going to monitor the chat. So please just throw your questions in the chat at any time, and we will pick them up as we go along. Thank you so much for being here. Liz, I am going to turn it over to you.
Well, great. Thanks, Carol. Stagnant buildings, whether they're empty or underutilized, are such a challenge for downtown districts across the state, across the country. And so we have to put together, tools in our toolbox to really address that. So today we're going to be talking about various tools that communities in our state have been using to address those stagnant properties and really get them activated. We're going to start today by talking a little bit about how you assess the downtown property and how you gather that data. Robert, I'm going to start with you from Warrenton. Robert Davey is the town manager in Warrenton. Robert, you have been really aggressive about working with downtown owners, downtown property owners, finding new uses, and in some cases, writing grants and securing funds for those property owners to really move those properties forward. Tell us about how you've done that.
Well, I guess, one of the first steps is assessing what kind of inventory you've got in your town, what kind of owners you have. We've had a vacant property ordinance on the books for a while, and to get that started, we started with kind of the Main Street recommendation to let our economic development subcommittee inventory the structures. So a first step was gathering data on the commercial buildings in the Main Street district and creating a spreadsheet that has their address, the building square footage, if available, the various owners' contact information, and the building status, like whether it's vacant, underutilized, or occupied. The tax office has been helpful for us as a source, and also the online county GIS as a way to gather that information on the property owners, the building owners. It often has their address, their current address, and not necessarily a phone number, but the address, and often has the square footage of the building on the GIS. And those records are typically updated regularly by the county or whoever the tax collector is. And so you can find good information there. Having this data, it will allow you to, particularly the square footage, will allow you to calculate what amount of space in your town is empty as compared to the total square footage available space. So while you're on a GIS system gathering addresses, that square footage data is important to gather too. Also, we've kind of distinguished between out-of-town owners and knowing how many of the building owners are out of town, so that we can kind of craft an ordinance that's based on who's here and who's not. So if you were drafting an ordinance, you might have some additional requirements, like require a property owner, a local property manager, so for an out-of-town property owner, you might require a local property manager for those individuals. And when you're going before the town council or the town board, you're armed with some data, and you'd be able to make some recommendations, and you've done your due diligence in terms of out of town versus in town and what those differences might be in an ordinance. The other thing we kind of distinguish between is if a building's been vacant for a while versus a short-term vacancy. That could be kind of a special notation in a spreadsheet is what we do, differentiating between a short-term vacancy and a long-term. So a short-term vacancy might be a building that's just in between tenants. And a long-term vacancy would be the ones you end up focusing on, the majority of your effort and time. And so distinguishing between those is important. And one way to distinguish between them is how long they've been vacant. So you might be thinking of crafting an ordinance of some sort that would have that triggers after a building has been vacant for more than 6 months or 12 months, something like that. So you would allow for tenant turnover and within for short-term vacancies. And then we also, distinguish between underutilized buildings, and we have quite a number of buildings in town that started out as storage units, antique stores, just storing everything they've got and never being open. And so we put those into a category for underutilized buildings. Ideally, those buildings would be a destination point, having a shop or a small business or some good reason for people to come to town. Again, all of this we put into a spreadsheet, very a la Main Street recommendations. And just to kind of summarize what we've done, gather good data from the tax record or the GIS, distinguish between short-term, long-term, and underutilized buildings, and then understand that this data you're gathering is going to be used down the road as you're crafting an ordinance.
Thanks so much, Robert. And you can really use any kind of spreadsheet to collect this data. We do have at the North Carolina Main Street Rural Planning Center a Excel spreadsheet database for gathering that information on the property. Having that information, being the most knowledgeable person about those downtown buildings really is the role of Main Street Director, Main Street committees and boards. So I think having that data is really the first step. So thanks so much for that. Paige, I'm going to turn it over to you for the next question.
Great. Our next question is for Kaylin. We've got Kaylin on from Lenore. Good morning. Hi, Kaylin. So we want to talk about assessing the actual property once we get that inventory complete. So Kaylin actually has a team that goes into properties to assess the condition so that they know what they're really getting whenever we get these properties, and we need to know what they're going to be when we pull back the curtain. So Kaylin, can you tell us a little bit more about that process?
Sure, be happy to. Are those slides going to be loaded here? Great, super. Kind of the first step that we do, and we've done for several years, is we realize early on that it's kind of the Rubik's Cube of redevelopment, Rubik's Cube of rehabilitation, Rubik's Cube of development, whichever one you want to call it. But we've carried these around literally in our pockets because it can be such a daunting task. I don't know if y'all can see that really well. To pull these projects off. And one of the first things that we kind of say, or at least I do, is I'm not an architect, I'm not an accountant, I'm not the fire marshal, I'm not planning and zoning, I'm not ABC, ALE, small business center, all of the above, city council, all of these folks that it takes for these projects to come to fruition so that you end up, let me get the right one here, you end up with, your project and something to be proud of. So it does take a lot of folks coming together and to build that team and to make those connections and those relationships. If you could change the screen. Next slide, thanks. Whoops, one back. Yep. Coming from a education background, I when I was new at this, been at it for about 10 years now and still learning every day. But when I was new at this, I kind of thought, wait a minute, what I'm hearing and what I'm learning in trainings and at Main Street conferences, et cetera, is not really what I'm hearing in the community. I was hearing things like it's going to cost $500,000 for a backflow system, or oh my gosh, I'm going to have to put a fire escape on the back of the building. Just kind of some strange and bizarre information that was being held locally that I wasn't hearing or seeing out in other communities. And so being new, I kind of thought we've got an education issue here, an information issue here, as much as we do anything else. So knowing that I wasn't going to be able to get all of the property owners, all of the business owners, staff, bankers, everybody else involved in this process to a conference, I needed to get the conference to the local community. So at that point, we invited David Maurer to come in and Jesse Plaster, both architects in historic preservation with that experience. And we launched a program called Moving Lenore to the Second Floor. And within that program, we had series of educational opportunities, bringing those experts into the community to kind of help facilitate some of the questions that were being asked and myths that were kind of going around the community, if you will. And so we, again, being new, I brought everybody into the room, and that included council, it included property owners, building owners, bankers, real estate agents, staff, anybody and everybody who had a part to play in downtown development and its impact. And it's kind of risky. I'll give you that, especially now understanding public meetings the way that we do. But we are still seeing benefits from starting that dialogue and starting those conversations even today. Next slide. This is just an illustration of when we invited the State Historic Preservation Office folks to come in. Encourage you to get to know those people. They're crucial for the parts that they play in the redevelopment process to help explain the historic rehabilitation tax credits. And I think further on in the day here, we'll have an opportunity to talk about incentives and other tools and programs that are very valuable to have in your downtown. And again, we started to talk about the Moving Lenore to the Second Floor initiative, which we tagged up to our incentive programs, which we'll talk a little bit further, I think, in the day here today. Okay, next slide. Also encouraging you along the way to involve your local media. Our team really wanted to get the word out to not only educate all the downtown stakeholders, but to educate the community. So we invited them to all of our seminars and our workshops. Any kind of opportunity we had, we did that at the very beginning. We continue to do it today. It's very advantageous to have those folks on your side getting the word out. Next slide. I can't stress to you enough, one of the asks here was to talk about what do you do to justify your work to your board. Getting the education and information to your board about the cost of an empty building is justification enough, at least for me. Getting to a North Carolina Main Street conference, getting to a Preservation North Carolina conference, or similar entities wherever what state you're in, and getting to state historic preservation trainings and workshops. Valuable information out there to arm yourself and your program. I've carried this infographic around with me. It's plastered outside my office door. Don Ripkema presented this to us many years ago. I'm sure the numbers probably need to be changed, but the impact is still the same. An empty building will cost state government, local government, banks, suppliers, media, utility companies, everybody in the community loses when there's a lot of vacancy. Next slide. So back to our team. We realized we needed to team up. It's a daunting task when you've got a considerable amount of vacancy. So we looked at Main Street folks, planning department, code enforcement, zoning, fire marshal, board members, and we put together kind of jokingly what we called the remod squad. And it's kind of painful work at times, so we wanted to make sure that we had a lot of fun and enjoyed each other's company as we're going through this. Next slide. And we realized as we were going through the process that it's not just about gathering the data or the inventories or the cost of emptiness. Very, very important tools to have, but it's also about understanding that buildings have stories to tell. The owners have stories to tell. So we decided it was time to really listen. We have vacant properties that are held by local folks. We have properties that are, held by people not in our community, absentee property owners, but we also have great success stories that are written by both local and absentee property owners. And getting to know what motivates them and what hinders their process from the building standpoint, as well as what's behind what motivates the property owner, is significantly important. I have illustrated here this gentleman, full disclosure and transparency, happens to be my husband. He owns a couple of commercial historic buildings in our downtown core, one of which houses a restaurant, and he helped the owner with adding an additional bathroom, did what it took, for a commercial kitchen. So very engaged as a property owner. But he does own a 12,000 square foot property that has been vacant for a few years. But I think one of the important things to understand with vacancy is it doesn't necessarily equate to the fact that the building is stagnant. Some of the work that needs to be done with pre-development, such as putting on a new roof, having the environmentals done. This was a former Ford Motor Company building, so it needed environmentals, abating asbestos or lead paint, getting architectural designs and getting your performance done. There's a lot to these little guys that take the time, and it may look like something is not happening with the building when in fact it is. So vacancy doesn't always equate to something being stagnant. So it's important to understand what's going on with that building and the property owner. Next slide. I've been asked to share a couple of success stories that did start out with the team. Code enforcement and planning, we're getting a lot of complaints about this particular structure in our downtown, and we lovingly now call it the little building with the big impact. There was conversation about demolition and becoming a parking lot, and I'm like, hey, I'm not in the historic district. And so I called Liz. I'm like, Liz, what do I do? And Liz says, Kaylin, you need to get to Preservation North Carolina folks and meet some people there. So I immediately saw that there was a conference, and I met Ted Alexander with Preservation North Carolina. Next slide, please. And from this, from that relationship, we worked with code enforcement, planning, Ted Alexander with PNC and the property owners for almost a year to get them into a comfortable place where they could actually donate the property to Preservation North Carolina. Very important tool to have in your toolkit if you have this type of entity within your state. They did help us navigate that property to someone with the interest in historic preservation, and that happened to be one of our local architects. So the building was renovated, rehabbed. There's now an Airbnb on the first floor, Airbnb on the second floor, retail on the first, but never discount your little guys. One of our smallest footprints in the district, but what it leveraged was incredible. Mr. Alexander introduced us to developers who were looking for sites in North Carolina. They ended up purchasing 2 historic mills, 1 freight depot, $30 million project with 50 plus apartments in one building. The next one's getting ready to open getting ready to go underway with another 50 plus the freight depot commercial space. It leveraged a $50,000 grant from the State Historic Preservation Office to look at identifying downtown historic neighborhood districts, and that's on the study list. It was our first tax credit project in the district, and we've had a historic district in our community since 2009, and it kind of took this long, several years, for the first historic tax credit project to actually happen in the district. So never underestimate the little guys. Next slide, please. And thanks, Liz, for that tip to get to PNC. Here's the celebration of our mill that was open. Also another wonderful project right on the edge of downtown. The Bluebell at Lenore Mills did receive a PNC Caraway Award, and we're very, very proud of that project as well. Next slide, please. Another great example, Stein's Ice Cream Parlor. I really like this particular example because it demonstrates the sentimental attachment that your property owners may have on their buildings. The folks, the son did say this was Dad's most loved building. Our childhood memories are kept inside. We don't know what to do. It can't possibly be saved. Next slide, please. So, as a team, we worked with these property owners and that family to get them to a place where they were comfortable enough to say, yes, okay, if we can't do it, Dad would want it back into good, productive use. Next slide, please. And again, it got into the hands of an architect that was familiar with historic preservation, David Maurer, who helped us with moving Lenore to the second floor. And he and his wife, Allison, have created this amazing, beautiful luxury apartment on the second floor. And there's a wonderful barbershop on the first floor. Next slide, please. Again, leverage. Next door to this particular space, we did see close to $650,000 in renovations and acquisitions happen. Next to this building, we now have the Salt Cave and Relaxation Wellness Center. And again, that brought 500 plus of private investment into our community. We were able to leverage another NPS grant, facade grant, for 3 other projects that are underway currently. So that's been a great asset to our downtown. The other great thing about this project is we get about 425 out-of-town visits weekly from coming to the Salt Cave. It is a destination business, which brings people in from all over the high country. So that's been great for us too. Next slide. Almost done, I promise. So you can start to leverage all these, pulling together your data and your information. Next slide, please. Okay, no more slides.
Thanks, Kaylin. That was great. I love what you said, especially about every building having a story. I think that's so important for us to hold on to as we're considering this redevelopment in our downtowns and across our towns, is that every building comes to us in this unique situation. And if we can remember that it had a history way before we came into contact with it, and it'll have a history long after, I think that's really valuable. Thanks for sharing.
Sure.
We also have Lizzie Morrison on the call, another former Main Streeter who now works with us on rural planning. Good afternoon, Lizzie.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. I am a community economic development planner for the Piedmont Triad region. And I'm going to talk to you about taking an active role in property owner engagement. Next slide, please. Okay, so where to begin? My advice is to go first. Communities need to establish stability in their downtown districts by going first before expecting private investment to step off the curb first and to assume that risk. So what does going first look like when activating stagnant properties? It looks like a balanced 4-point approach, which is what we teach under Main Street America's model. But it looks like being prepared with a strategic plan and building those stakeholder relationships and organizational reputations. And that takes getting your feet on the street, really getting to know the stakeholders and the property owners. It looks like making public investments downtown, including incentives to support and establish partnerships with private property owners like facade grants. It looks like making visible design improvements to public and private spaces to change perception so that people start to think something new is happening here. And it looks like programming downtown with catalytic and inclusive activity that builds that asset-based community brand and vision. Really, this work is so important in activating those stagnant properties downtown. Next slide. I'm not going to get into the Main Street 4-point approach, but if you'll see that it really does take that kind of all-encompassing approach to activate those properties. And if you want to learn more about this, you can visit the NC Main Street and Rural Planning Center website. Next slide. So now what? After you've gone first, you want to identify and engage those property owners. So what does that look like? Identifying the property owners that are most likely to invest would be finding the new property owners. Properties that have just changed hands are the ones that are most likely to get movement. Even potential property owners or people that are interested in opening a business in your downtown, having a piece of your downtown. And then finally, legacy property owners, which is a little bit harder. Convincing the legacy property owner is not so much about convincing, but more so leading their thought process to build the value of their family's legacy, which you heard Kaylin mention that as well. Asking them to change something that their family hasn't changed for generations is tough. If they don't have the capacity or willpower to invest, your role is to serve as a connector in the property owner's hopeful transition. And then finally, absentee property owners are the hardest egg to crack, but attempt to engage, attempt to communicate, attempt to be a resource, and then know your sticks. I'm not going to go over the sticks, but that will be covered a little later in this webinar. I did see someone having some questions about that. Next slide. Okay, so engage. What does engagement look like? It looks like an approachable and professional meeting over coffee with a local resource team. And I'm basically describing what Kaylin just said. You have a team of people, municipal staff, downtown development board members, local developers, stakeholders with relevant expertise who are willing to help property owners re-engage and redevelop their stagnant properties. As part of that engagement, you want to lead a tour of the downtown district to demonstrate the value already placed in the downtown, both economic and emotional value. You want to celebrate the successes and paint the picture of the vision for the future while highlighting growth opportunities. Your message should be that downtown is vibrant and there is hope. There's really no room for pessimism in this role. They want to feel, developers or property owners want to feel like they're making a secure and stable investment. And so it's your role to help them understand that you're aware of where the growth opportunities are and where there's room to grow, but that there is a vision and plan for the future. And then you want to continue communications, offer to make connections, and follow up with relevant information. Next slide. So you've had the first meeting and have given a downtown tour. So what do you do next with the legacy property owner? You want to be an active listener. You want to ask that legacy property owner to share their family's local legacy and stories and connections to the building. Verbalizing that legacy will shape the property owner's decision-making for the future, which I heard Kaylin say was pretty much what they did in Lenore. Some questions that you might consider asking them are, would you mind telling me the story of this building? What would these walls say if they could speak? What does this building represent to your family? What is your family's vision for preserving that legacy? You need to demonstrate genuine interest in their story. So, if you're just kind of talking at them the whole time and not really interested in their family's story, they're not going to have confidence that you'll be a good shepherd of their legacy. Next slide. So demonstrating the emotional and economic value of the building. The emotional value is important to the legacy property owner. And so you need to get them thinking about, what does the decline of this building mean to the community? What would that do to their legacy? What would that feel like for them? And so you want to make sure that they understand that downtown revitalization, if they were to redevelop this building, it would generate a higher community self-esteem, which would make people proud of their place. If you're proud of your place, you'll preserve and maintain and grow that place. And then you also want to demonstrate the economic value of this, of that building as well. I've got the little receipt for cost of an empty building. This is from a 2019 economic development study or economic impact study of several Main Street communities. And we can make that available to you all. It's on the NC Main Street Rural Planning website. But you can see there that there's sales not made, rent not collected, you know, jobs that aren't there, tax value that's not there in the building. So they can, if they're able to either invest in their property or turn that property over, they will be making not only an emotional impact in terms of preserving their family's legacy, they will be making an economic impact themselves. And that's how you help to turn over that building. Next slide. So finally, what is your role there? You want to be a connector. And when I was listening to Kaylin's presentation, I heard her being a connector in that. Being a connector doesn't mean that you are this instant expert in, you know, historic tax credits or all the resources available. It is fully okay to let a property owner know that you're not sure of the answer, but you're gonna find that answer and get back to them. You want to assure them that you can help them get to the path to preservation. And so having a general understanding of local incentives, providing technical assistance for that, connecting them to local government, connecting them to experienced preservation architects, contractors, or accountants, connecting them to the Main Street Rural Planning Center, and certainly if it's a historic building, connecting them to the State Historic Preservation Office is important. Oh, and thank you, Liz, for linking that. My mantra has always been to tell property owners that we'll be with you all the way. And I think having that confidence in a stable partner gives them the confidence to go ahead and step off the curb after the community. Next.
For sharing, Lizzie.
Thank you.
That was great. We know that you were certainly an awesome connector in Mountain Area as well. For those that don't know, Lizzie was in Mountain Area as a Main Street director beforehand and had a number of really awesome building redevelopments to share about. So thanks for giving us some tips, Lizzie. And I will throw it back to Liz for town investment.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much. Well, next, I'd like to talk a little bit with Mayor Alice Butler with the town of Roseboro. Mayor Butler, under your leadership, you have been very strategic. Roseboro's been very strategic about obtaining underutilized properties and working as a town government to make that investment and also to then also flip some of those buildings. Tell us a little bit about how you've gotten the town board on board to make that investment in your downtown properties.
Okay, thank you. And glad to be with you. I've learned a whole lot of great information already, just listening to Caitlin and Lizzie and Randall. As far as our board goes, the town board, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm not seeing anything change. As far as the town board goes, we're very lucky that we have just a wonderful group on the board. One that has lived here all his life, one that's came back after retirement, two that are fairly new to the area, and one that actually owns a restaurant downtown. So whenever you're, all of them are retired. So I think our town board, like many town boards across the state, are looking for some new people to come on board, for the younger generation to get here. But one of the things that started, I became mayor in 2015, kind of got started on the board. I got on the board in 2012 and started in 2015. And through that time, we've always been a small town Main Street community, which that in itself is such a blessing. And every day, and even through this seminar today, I keep learning of the resources that are available through that. But as far as with the board, one of the things that really got our board going was in 2018, someone came to me and wanted to start a festival downtown. And that right there just sort of got the whole board so excited to see 3,000 plus people downtown for an event. And I think just seeing that just reinvigorated them and got them thinking, okay, we need to do something, because we do have a lot of the older buildings. We've got vacancies, some that keep flipping and turning over and that type thing. But I think that's really when the board really got behind things and said, we need to change this and we want it to be better. And these are just some pictures that we call it, and I'm going to say it's Bloom Fest. Our motto is take root and bloom. And I'll go back, that started about 2012, whenever we were given a grant from the state and we were able to rebrand ourselves. So from Take Root and Bloom, we started Bloom Fest, BLOOM Fest. A lot of people think I say balloon. So that's why I spell it out, because people are like, how are you going to do those hot air balloons? But anyway, it's through those town events and people seeing people they hadn't even seen in years, because let's face it, we all want to stay in our homes. So I think that got the town board saying, yes, we want to get things going again and make our town better. If you want to go to the next slide, Alive in the Borough, well, on this slide is, again, one of the things that just started this past year. So things keep changing and developing in downtown with town events. Next slide. Downtown creation. So how do we bring, again, this is with the board's help. One of the things that we're fortunate to have in downtown Roseboro is the Mountain to Sea Trail coming through. And the Mountain to Sea Trail actually have a Mountain to Sea Trail hiker staying with my husband and I for last night and tonight. So it brings a lot of people into town from not just the state, but from all over the country coming into town. So getting these, and I've heard these words from everybody, but partnerships, relationships, building all of these are just so important, because you never know when something's going to come back to that you need that phone number. This is that you need to get in contact with somebody. But here you can see actually Ben Jones and myself actually working on the brick trail, and it actually has the bricks were sold and names put on them from the community. And you can see before kind of what it looked like. It was just concrete there. And now this area, and you can see the brick in the third one, this has become a gathering place for people. This has also become where we have, when we do have festivals, our food trucks are along. This is the old railroad bed. So this was important, and all these things keep getting the town board saying, yes, we want to do more. We want to do more. I think you just, like with all of us, when you see one thing and there's kind of a domino effect. If you want to go to the next slide, please. So you kind of can tell from this picture here. Again, this was actually taken pretty recently. Our downtown is not where we want to be, but I can tell you we're making strides every day to it. One of the things that the town board kept talking about, and our citizens, was our sidewalks, because they're very unique. The sidewalks back in about 2006 were developed because to keep water supposedly from running back into the buildings, and it's kind of a V shape, not easy to walk on. It hasn't worked. Water is still running back into the buildings. So one of the things we finally got was a grant from Golden Leaf. And again, the board had to get behind this to approve all this. Everything in a downtown area, in a small town like ours, has to be approved by the town board, because we are mayor council. That may not be the way it is in all the boards, but for us, all this has to be approved. But again, this goes back to relationships and that type of thing. But Golden Leaf, we were able to get a grant for $126,000, and we just awarded this to an architectural group, to come up with a design that's going to work for our town. And I'm very, very excited to see what's going to happen with downtown. And all these little improvements that you see along the way, the citizens notice. And when we tell them, yes, they've complained about it for this long, well, we've got something, just wait. And it's all building blocks. It all takes a lot of time for for something to happen. I mean, there are projects that have been worked on for 8, 9, 10 years, and you finally see them come to fruition. One simple thing, this doesn't have to do with the town, but when you don't have much money as a small town, and we're in Roseboro, North Carolina. A lot of y'all have never heard of Roseboro, I'm sure. We're actually in the largest county in North Carolina, Sampson County. We are the second largest town in Sampson County. As the second largest town, we are 1,160 people. So if that kind of puts it into where we are, the largest town in Sampson County is Clinton with about 8,000 people. So that just, I know every town in North Carolina, in the country, we all have our unique problems or issues that we deal with, but yet they're all very similar. Next slide, please. So Liz wanted me to talk more about the transforming, how we've done it, getting the town board. And I'm just very fortunate. I've got a wonderful town board. So, we work together, we support each other, we respect each other. We don't socialize together at all. But when we come together for the town, that's what everyone on our town board wants, is what's going to be best for the town of Roseboro. So the two pictures here were taken a while back. The one on the left is actually used to be the green awning was a beauty shop. And the one to the left of that used to be an alley a long time ago. This picture was actually just taken yesterday. Was an alley years ago. So we realized that we needed more parking in town. So we brought before the board the idea of these two buildings, maybe keeping the facades like they are, but basically tearing them down to make an alleyway to go to the parking lot that's in the back there. Because we have restaurants. One of the things is for us to become a restaurant row. Restaurants are the things that have really been popular and been, what is the word I'm looking for? Successful in Roseboro. So we're looking for more parking. So the town board, all of them went out there, looked at it, whatnot, and decided yes. So, and like I said, I've been fortunate. They've all supported the different things that we've come up with. This hasn't happened yet, obviously, but that's something that's in one of our phases. The one on the right, this is, again, it used to be a community garden just a year and a half ago. For about 5 years, there was a community garden park planted out here. It was beautiful, went along with our theme of take root and bloom. Now, the person that kind of led that moved out of town and, moved on to other things. And so we had this vacant lot, and one of our business owners says, you know what, let's transform that and make it bloom into a concert series. So last year we had about 5 concert series right here. It's called Alive in the Borough. Again, a way to bring people downtown, have music. One of Western Sampson Commerce Group, another partner, actually provided the beer garden that was there. And we actually had restaurants serving food. Instead of bringing in food trucks, we wanted to let the restaurants know that we support you. So they actually were running food back and forth to the people as they ordered it and stuff. Next year, this time, if I showed you this picture, you're going to see green grass, you're going to see landscape, and you're going to see a stage. Through one of the grants, through the rural transformation, the RC2, we were able to get around $49,000 for a stage. So now we're going to be working with NC State students to design that stage and to do the architect for that stage. And last night at a Western Sampson Commerce Group meeting, the general manager for the steel plant here in town, I was talking to him. He said, come see me. I think Mike can help you out with the steel that you need for that project. So it's those type things that and one of the board members was at the meeting last night and he heard that conversation. So a lot of it's the communication, letting people know, letting the board members know, letting the people in the community know what you need, and those type things. Next slide, please. So this is the building that is the Rural Transformation Grant. And I will tell you, this is what really got the town into thinking about purchasing buildings and flipping them. So this was huge when this came about a couple years ago through Small Town Main Street, through NC Commerce. So I was immediately like, we didn't even own a building then. So what do we do? So I immediately went and contacted different people of the properties downtown. And this building here was actually an absentee owner. He lived in Michigan. And after a good bit of talking to him, he decided that he would sell the building. He didn't have a need for it. It had been empty for about 20 years. So this is the building that David Meyer, who I believe Caitlin mentioned, he has got the the design bid. He was awarded that, and he's going to be working on this to put retail/restaurant, might be retail down below, and 1 to 2 apartments above, affordable apartments above. So we are extremely excited about this through the Rural Transformation Grant Program. Whenever we were looking to buy this property, there was also another property. I think it's on the next slide. Yes, it's the property as you're looking onto the left. This is referred to as the Spell Building in town. This would be a legacy building. The man that owned this property did not want to sell it, had been offered multiple people had tried to buy this property, and he just couldn't. It was in his family. He just couldn't see giving it up. He hadn't had the store opened. It was a furniture store for years, but he could not give it up. After talking with him, again, we talked to him about the grant, potential for the grant. He finally decided that he would sell it. As it turned out, the paperwork, everything could not happen till after we had to turn in the grant application. But the board decided, yes, we're going to go ahead and buy this property from him anyway. It was a legacy property to him, but to be honest, we knew it was just going to be sitting here. So we bought this, the town bought this property from him. And since then we have flipped it, and someone else has bought it, and they already have had their architects looking at the building and are looking to have a brewery there one day. So it would have, I'll just be honest, it would never have changed anything. Now we have the hope of gradually having a brewery, and this sits right beside it is the area that I just showed you for where the concert series is held. So it goes all right, hand in hand with the concert series. So I mean, with the brewery, the two go hand in hand. So he's very excited about the stage, and he's actually at the end, you're going to see a video that he created to how the owner of this building and a couple other buildings downtown, how he sees the future of this town. So I think the more you talk, the more you're just out on the street and you get the excitement building for the different properties. The one in the middle is the one that's the RTG, and then the one on the right is a building that was actually given to the town. And we're still working on exactly what's going to become of that building, but we have flipped it. We sold that to someone. So they have a lot of ideas for that building also. So I think a lot of times hopefully getting these properties out of people's hands that have done nothing with them for so many years into someone else's hands is a positive thing. So the board kind of took a leap of faith, knowing we didn't need to be tied up with these buildings forever, but that we could flip them and get somebody else interested in them. Next slide, please. And this is the goal. And this is a video that the guy that has bought 2 or 3 of these buildings actually had one of his architects, videographers make for the town. And I wanted to share it with you because it's kind of the culmination of, and you're seeing it before the town board has seen this. He just shared this with me about a week ago. And I said, can I share it with something that I'm doing tomorrow? And he's like, absolutely. I made it for you. He said, you can do with it whatever you want. And I hope that it works. It's a really cool video, but I think the whole thing is, if you as a leader get excited, if you can pass that excitement on, if you can get the people to buy into it, it can all come together. And it does. Sometimes it's 1 step forward and 2 backwards, but then you just keep moving forward again. And that's what I'm so proud of our town board, our Small Town Main Street Committee. Any of y'all that are in North Carolina that can take advantage of the fellow program through the School of Government and NC Lead need to look into that. We've had Tyler Wise, this is her 2nd year with us, through that. And she has been able to give so much to the town and devote to our downtown area. So you have to keep looking for those resources there. There is no video with it. You can see, this is the building that I was just showing you. You can see the stage where we looked where the community garden was. You come around, take a right, and this is the vision. You know, I talked about the sidewalks and how they need to be redone. He took that into account, not even knowing that we were having the sidewalks redone. Up here where we're getting ready to turn to go right, this is the two buildings that I was telling you that we will be taking down. This was just his vision of what that alleyway can look like going down one day. Restrooms over here to the left, parking in the back, and the whole community, Sampson County, everyone else coming out to enjoy a concert series, Bloomfest out here with entertainment. Just so many endless possibilities for this one little block in downtown Roseboro. Thank you.
Alice, thanks so much. That's a great video. And, you know, Roseboro has done so much with just one step at a time, taking those baby steps and then building on that and getting bigger and bigger projects. So proud of the work that you all have done.
Thank you. Y'all have been a huge, huge help to us in all of that. Thank you.
We're going to take a break for just a minute on the speakers and give some time to answer some questions that have been coming in through the chat. So Hessa, I think you and Carol are going to be monitoring those for us.
Yes. So we have a few questions that relate to the Alice's section. We have somebody that said, I am told that Golden Leaf is not currently interested in anything other than industry.
That has not been our, I mean, obviously we got the sidewalk design and they came and met with us. As long as it's owned by the town, you know, they were willing to help us. So I mean, that just was in the last, that we were awarded that like in October, November. So I would keep checking with them.
And then follow up to that one is, I thought tearing down buildings was frowned upon.
And it is, I mean, it is, there's no question about it, but one of those was already an alleyway from years ago. You can see where that was an alleyway, and the building that's there, you can just tell it was an alleyway. The second building, we may be tearing it down. We may not. We may actually just make that a more narrow one. We've got to look at that.
If I can add to that, though, Alice, we've also looked at being able to save the facades on those buildings and use the cut through. The buildings have some pretty significant damage interior, but by saving those facades, we're saving that streetscape and then using that a little bit differently. So that's an option that we've also looked at.
And the guy that did the videographing, he knew nothing about the facades, that we were going to try to keep the facades and that type thing. I mean, I haven't even met the gentleman that made that. So
Okay, and then we have our next question is, how did you pay for the entertainment?
we actually got some sponsors, and most of it was through sponsorships, some local businesses, and yeah, sponsorships, and the town board. But what our town budget put in was very little. It's mainly sponsorships.
And then gifts to the town seems to be a stress on property tax.
No, I guess it wasn't in our case, to be honest. It's been a plus. We accepted the donation of that one building, and then we've sold it, so it's been a plus. I mean, I think you do have to be careful. Obviously, you don't want to be accepting everybody that wants to turn in their property. I mean, you want it to be, but for us, that was, you know, it was a good thing.
And then somebody asked, when you flip a building, do you place deadlines for rehab? Give examples. And then Lizzie, thank you for answering that on the chat. She said, yes, she would enter into a development agreement with the developer with milestone requirements, timeline requirements, and a clawback. And then one thing to add, historic preservation projects to take time. While there should be expectations in place in a DA, communities should be flexible if significant process is being made. So that's the answer to that one. And then I know last one, we're going into town ordinance. So our first question was, let me find it, vacant property ordinance. The question, what is the enforcement method when a property owner refuses to comply with ordinance? Robert, I know that you're next with that topic. So if you choose to answer that while talking about it, feel free, or you can just answer it now.
Well, we've got penalties baked into our ordinance. It's basically $100 a day when they don't comply. So it adds up pretty quickly.
Awesome. That is all the questions we have so far. We'll continue on with the webinar.
Paige, I'm going to flip it to you.
I was gonna say, well, we're right on track because we got the question about the vacant properties, and I know this is a question we get all the time from our local directors, and it's been a hot topic this year, especially as people are wondering what you can do, because we've heard all these great examples and we've heard all these wonderful tips when you can have property owners come to play ball, but if not, what are the next steps that you may need to take? And sometimes you may need to consider implementing a vacant property ordinance. So Robert in Warrenton is going to share a little bit more about how they're addressing vacant properties, because they have actually adopted a vacant property registry. And I would love for you to just tell us a little bit more about how that process worked, Robert, and what kind of success you've had with that so far.
Okay. Going through this process, we wanted to be very intelligent and due diligent and have done our homework. And so we started out identifying ordinances in other towns. Ideally, we would have liked to have had ordinances in neighboring towns or similar sized towns, but we looked at all types of ordinances, even larger cities, for comparison. Just knowing what ordinances are out there and already in place was important to us. And then reaching out to them to find out how successful they might have been was also important, not only as a Main Street person, but it's going to be important to people who you end up presenting an ordinance to, like the town council. When presenting to the town council, one of the first questions you're likely to get is, who else and what other towns have these types of ordinances in place, and how has it fared with them? So it may be best to present examples of neighboring towns and towns of your size, but you definitely want to have those handy in a presentation and not go into a presentation without them. So you want to probably craft ordinances that are appropriate for your town size. So Raleigh or Charlotte's ordinances may not be suitable. Raleigh and Charlotte may have too much language, too many details, covered in too many aspects that really don't impact what's going on in your particular size town. So ordinances appropriate for your size and situation are important, and you don't want ordinances that are difficult for staff to implement. So hopefully the ordinances would not require hiring additional staff. Ordinances that are too onerous or have too many compliance points may be hard to implement, but they also may be hard for the general public to understand and to remember. So looking back at the data gathering process, as you distinguished back then, short-term, long-term vacancies, you probably want to handle those a bit differently in the ordinances. For short-termers, they may not even be included in an ordinance, as they may be between tenants. But you'll want to consider what defines a short-term versus a long-term vacancy. For example, a long-term vacancy may be a vacancy over 6 months or 12 months. But you still may want to include short-termers in the ordinances so that they may be required to dress up their windows or not paper over windows or not board things up. For underutilized buildings, for example, buildings used for storage, They can be dealt with in ordinance as well by preventing them from being used for storage and nothing else. One compromise between current owners and a new ordinance could be allowing a building to be used for partial storage, but not storage that can be seen from the street. Very important is the handling of out-of-town property owners in the ordinance. I think, as Lizzie said, this is going to be your toughest group. Out-of-towners have no local peer pressure to encourage or force them to repair or fix up or occupy their buildings. Out of sight means out of mind to these property owners. Therefore, you might want to consider special rules in the ordinance for these owners, such as, this is what we did in Warrenton. We required them to retain a local property manager, and they have to provide that local contact information of that local property manager. Again, these owners can be some of the most difficult to reach and compel, so having some additional teeth or additional requirements in the ordinances may be helpful. Penalties for not complying to this can be $100 initially and then $100 per day afterwards. Each day is considered an individual event, so those can add up pretty quickly. Also helpful in the implementation of an ordinance would be some sort of incentive provided by the municipality to encourage compliance. Local property owners will particularly appreciate this aspect, and that could be anything from assistance from the Arts Council in helping decorate empty storefronts to assistance from the town in the form of an awning or signage grant. Those are particularly minor expenditures for a general fund budget, but they tend to have some significant impact, the awning or signage grants. Having incentives at the same time as you're implementing an ordinance with teeth can help reduce negative feedback and resistance that you will undoubtedly get, particularly among locals. It goes without saying that an attorney will be involved in the development of these ordinances. An attorney can advise what's legal and within the ability of the town to control. Often the ordinance is part of a nuisance section in the town's overall ordinances. So to summarize, I would suggest focus on crafting ordinances that are appropriate for your town size and situation, and make sure that there are enough teeth and incentives in the ordinance to go along with them.
Thanks, Robert. And you all just adopted this in the last year, is that right?
No, we've had it on the books for quite a while.
Okay. Gotcha. And you've seen it be pretty successful for getting those property owners interested, at least?
Yeah, it gets them in the habit of complying and gets them in the habit of thinking about what's going on. It triggers the notion that the town is really starting to focus on development in downtown district. So it helps in a lot of ways.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thanks for sharing, Robert. All right, we're gonna go back to Liz.
And I'm going to go back to Kaylin. Kaylin, in Lenore, you created a fire suppression grant program that was designed to really mitigate the cost of costs associated with building rehabs and putting in that fire suppression system. Tell us a little bit more about how that works, and also how you've used the tax credit program to leverage investment in your downtown.
Sure. If I could get that slide, it was up just a second ago. Right. Our actual water, fire, ice, with that assistance, it's actually embedded again with our Moving Lenore to the Second Floor program. And what we've actually done to kind of incentivize a lot of this forward movement, we took our traditional facade grant and tweaked it a little bit to incorporate eligible projects such as the ones that we're talking about here that had concern. And it also incorporated the ability for these property owners to have time with an architect that was familiar and well-versed in historic preservation, and do walkthroughs with these property owners and with the architect. And we organized this in a full day event, as well as individual opportunities for these property owners. And the way we did this, we had it as an eligible project within our grant, so that a property owner could spend time with these architects. We paid for 1/3 of that cost. The property owner would pay the other 2/3. For example, if it was $210 to spend with the architect, we paid for $70. Property owner paid for $140. We went with the architect and the property owner through the walkthrough, took notes, shared ideas, recorded if we could. And from these conversations and this dialogue, it allowed the property owner to understand so many questions that they previously had about their building. Were they going to need a fire suppression? Was it going to have to be a residential fire suppression type system? Was it going to end up with a backflow system? All of these questions. What about a fire escape? Back when they were thinking that was the way to navigate that. So it allowed them to get a lot of answers to significant questions that were hindering their ability to move forward. And some of the questions and answers that, you know, that they received, they realized, wait a minute, am I going to go forward with a project? Am I going to put my property on the market because I'm not going to be able to go forward, or I don't have the desire to do this? It would be better served in someone else's hands. And then, should they choose to, if they really wanted to move a bit forward, we also included schematic design work as part of this process. And the property owner could choose to have this design work completed to let them have a better idea as to whether or not they were going to put in a restaurant or residential space on the second floor. How would that work? With each building being so unique, whether it's 1-story, 2-story, 3, maybe the structure is a 3-story with a 2-story next to it, which opens this particular floor up to a residential possibility. Each building is so unique that you need to have that architect in there with the property owner to help them determine what's the highest best use for that particular structure. And getting the schematic design work, again, we helped pay for that through the grant program. And it allowed us to maintain that design work in our office, so that pre-development work, if you will, was being done for future property owners should that property owner decide to sell the property, go forward with a project. And it helped us for future opportunities there. Now, we did not cover mechanical, plumbing, and engineering. We didn't go that far. That, again, is once the project moves forward. But we did find that we had, this is an old slide or snap here of our phases for this incentive program. We did find that we've got more than maybe 30, 35 participants at this point. We saw up to, last count, maybe 30 acquisitions as a result of this. Property owners deciding that they did not want to move forward. They were going to put their property on the market. They were in the hands of folks who did want to move forward. And as you can see, there's another snip there that talks about property value. I think one of the things that Robert just alluded to is significantly important for the downtown community as a whole. If you've got a property that has been redeveloped, rehabilitation, and that property value has gone up, and you've got something right next to it where the roof is still caving in, you know, there's give and take there, and there's a lot of effect there. But once you can start communicating to your stakeholders and council, I apologize, that snip is not recent. There's probably about maybe 10 or 11 more projects there. But you can see when you're going from 1.9 tax value to 5 million, you know, in a span of a few years, that really starts to speak volumes to your downtown community. So having something in play that really does incentivize the opportunity for your property owners to understand what their building could yield, and to be there to help them. Even it's a small incentive. I mean, it's not a large payout. This is not a capital help for some of these projects. It's a smaller, very typical facade program that we tweaked a little bit, that many communities do have. So, but we've seen and gained a lot from having them. And they can do things like put in a fire suppression system, or an additional door in the back, or an additional bathroom that might help the project move forward, and we're able to incentivize that and help them in that way. Next slide. I think I have one more. Again, just talking about the importance of knowing what's in your toolbox. The Rural Transformation Grant, we're thrilled to be able to be a recipient in our community, and we'll see that funding go to the council. Has been very excited with all of the forward movement we've seen to now invest in properties that are owned by the city. The historic Lenore High School is going to be transformed into an event center, flex space for recreational use. So we're super excited to see that happen. But understanding what grants are available for you and your program, and understanding historic rehabilitation tax credits, how maybe you could tweak your local incentives to help further move things along, can be significantly important. One last quick little slide. We are hopefully next week, fingers crossed, going to be just received this morning the final draft of the Downtown Lenore Master Plan. This is the first master plan that our community has been able to receive, and we hope to see it adopted at the council meeting next week. I believe that one of the really powerful aspects of having a master plan done for your downtown is the community engagement opportunity. Not only do you get really great ideas about, the future vision of where your downtown could be, but understanding the pulse of your community, how they feel about downtown, what they would like to see, what they would not like to see continue or not like to see happen within the downtown core is really, really significantly important, because it's empowering. It'll allow council to look forward. And I'm thankful for Robert and the information that he's giving. I'll probably be calling him for some further questions. What will be the appetite for council to move forward with a vacancy ordinance? Well, we'll explore that, but we'll also have the ability through a master plan and strong documented community engagement. The community would like to see this. The community would no longer like to see that. And I find that to be very empowering information for a council to be able to have when they start looking at some hard topics, such as, continued vacancy, and how to move those properties forward.
Caitlin, great information. It is so important to think about a property and rehab and think in terms of, again, its steps moving forward. And just because somebody owns it doesn't mean that they're going to be the one that's ultimately going to rehab it. And sometimes it goes through several different owners before it's actually rehabbed. So each step that we can move towards improvement helps to lessen the impact of having a vacant property in our downtown, even if we don't get it all the way where we want it to be the first try or even the second or third try. Sometimes these projects take years.
And multiple owners. That's why having that documentation of the walkthrough, recording it, taking notes, having the schematic design work retained in our office, because we helped to pay for it. It could be a nonprofit that's facilitating this. It doesn't have to come from a local grant incentive, but because you're kind of helping to facilitate the process, you can maintain those records for future property owners should that change hands.
Absolutely. Paige, I'm going to kick it back to you.
Thanks. We also have Janice on the call, who's the town manager in Hertford. Janice, how are you doing?
Oh, well, thank you.
Great. We would love for you to talk to us about some tools that you've worked with in Hertford, including condemnation.
Well, Hertford is definitely still a work in progress, maybe at an earlier stage than some that we've heard from already. Condemnation, of course, is the last resort. That's what we don't want to do. We don't want to enforce it. But it's, to be a viable threat, you have to at least be able to enforce it. It would be like threatening a child all the time, what you're going to do to them. And then when you don't do it, obviously you get ignored and the behavior continues. So what we have found, to be the fastest and most effective often is just the use of the power of the building inspector. And that's without even having an ordinance. We had one situation here in town, especially a gas station that was just really an eyesore and that was falling apart little by little. The adjoining property owners were complaining about it, you know, almost falling on their property. He had dealt with the town previously, and was left with somewhat of a sour taste in his mouth. And so he had decided he was just going to hold on to his property and really not do anything with it, nothing to improve it. Many people were talking to him, encouraging him, but he was being quite stubborn about it. But one of the things that we tend to do with some of these downtown buildings, I have found, is really just ignore how bad the condition is. And if we think the front looks bad, we only have to walk around to the back of them to see, you know, the wall has buckled, the roof is falling in, you know, just all sorts of conditions that are unsafe. So, you know, when you can't get someone to understand what you're saying, sometimes you have to hit them with a brick. And that's what we were able to do with this property owner. It had gotten to the point where I told the building inspector, you don't even have to get out of your car. You could basically do a drive-by inspection and see that this is a building that is ready for condemnation or something is not done soon. So the building inspector has the authority under North Carolina, I'm sorry, y'all, I'm an attorney, under North Carolina General Statute 160D-1119. It says that if the building appears to the inspector to be especially dangerous to life because of its liability to fire or because of bad conditions of walls, overloaded floors, defective construction, decay, unsafe wiring or heating system, inadequate means of egress or other causes, it should be held to be unsafe, and the inspector can immediately affix the notice of the dangerous character to the building. Our inspector will normally then try to reach out and call the building owners. If not, of course, he can serve them. But this seems to get immediate attention, and people care about their building at all. When the building inspector says, if you don't do something quickly, I'm going to condemn it, they seem to move a little faster. So immediately someone was there at least working on the roof, you know, stabilizing that. Has that taken care of the whole building? No. But at least the greatest hazards have been dealt with. And now we continue to talk and cajole the owner into moving forward with his plan for that building. Of course, the other vehicle that can be used is that towns can pass a regulation authorizing the repair, closing, and demolition of non-residential buildings. And that's at 160D-1129. And in that situation, the regulation, the town can set its own minimum standards of maintenance, sanitation, and safety. But those minimum standards do have to be related to conditions that are dangerous and injurious to public health, safety, and welfare, and identify circumstances under which a public necessity exists for the repair, closing, or condemnation of the building. So those are some of the tools that you can use. But again, as I indicated, condemnation is the last resort, certainly not what we want to do. But it does help when you do have these tools to at least seriously get the attention of the building owners who just won't move on their property that's falling down around their heads.
Absolutely. No, those are great tools to have because it is the last resort in a way, but then again, we've also had towns experience when they've had really dangerous buildings that are not being addressed, and then something happens, the building actually falls down on the street, and that causes, an emergency. So that's really much worse than trying to condemn the building. So it's great to have these tools in our back pocket to be prepared so that we can prevent those things from happening. Thank you for sharing, Janice.
And we have
Certainly.
some questions on that part. Let's see. somebody missed the architect cost, and I think that was Kaylin talking. So he wanted to know, how did they pay for the architects
Sure.
and how they're selected?
Sure. We were fortunate to have an architect within our community who has a passion for and experience with historic preservation projects. And also David Maurer had been working with us on moving Lenore to the second floor with our educational process, and was more than happy to want to participate with that. We kind of did an all call out and tried to get as much feedback on who would be available and interested in helping us with that. And the architects decided the fees for this particular service. An example I gave before was to do a walkthrough and just to have a conversation. We took notes again and or recorded as we walked through with the property owner. For example, if it was $210, and I think that was around that fee, $250 or something like that. We paid the $70, the property owner paid $140. Best investment ever. I mean, just getting the answers to those questions, invaluable. And then if they decided to go on for schematic design work, we usually saw that run anywhere between $1,500 and $4,500, depending on the size of the building and the complexity of the building. So the schematic design work, which showed where bathrooms could go, kitchens could go, first floor, second floor use, etc. Based on that building's unique assets. And then again, we paid the 1/3 through the grant, and the property owner paid the architect the remaining. And again, held on to that information, which is invaluable.
Thanks, Kaylin. Were there any more questions, Hissa?
Yeah, we had one for condemnation. Once condemned, what liability does it create to the town, such as having it to tear it down, etc.?
I'm not sure what you mean by liability.
I think they're referring to the cost. Does the town take on the cost of tearing it down?
Right, it would be a cost that the town takes on. It does then create a lien against the property, which in our case, our attorney would then go into court and use that lien to have the property, the land turned over to the town. And then that gives the town the opportunity to move forward selling it or whatever they want to do. But yes, that's a cost that would be on the town, but it is a lien on the property.
Okay, let's move on a little bit. And Lizzie, I'm going to bounce back to you for a minute. You've had some experience in teaching property owners about the importance of maintaining their property and managing their property. Tell us a little bit about how you have done that through your years.
Sure. And so this is really an extension of that property owner engagement. And so for this section of Upping Skills, I want to get into some more details of what those conversations around property management really look like. Next slide. So what's your role in this? Again, you're hearing a lot of what that local leader's role is from all of these colleagues here. You want to be the visionary. You need to have a strategic plan and a vision. You need to go first. You need to be the listener and be accessible. Repeat that mantra, will be with you all the way. You're the connector and the communicator. You're the standard setter and the downtown advocate. You're the preservationist, and you're the source of hope for the future of the community. You, meaning your downtown organization, your community, your local team. And for this part of it, I want to focus on being the go-to source of information and a resource to the property owner. So next slide. So in your listening to the property owner, you'll want to begin to take the temperature of the property owner's ability to successfully redevelopment a property. So in addition to pulling those questions out surrounding, pulling out that family legacy, You also want to get answers to these questions. Questions like, what's your vision for the property? Do you have a business plan? Do you have experience in this area? Do you have a project budget? Do you have a team in place? What's your project timeline? Answering these questions are going to help you identify potential red flags or funding gaps, and what the project needs to succeed. You know, you'll want to find these out in addition to what Kayla mentioned earlier in considering the current status of the building and the developability of the building itself. Of course, it's best if you don't rapid fire these questions at a property owner or potential property owner, but rather let them happen in organic conversations where you're actively listening and genuinely interested. Just a bit of advice, always make time for these meetings and never be too busy or too rushed to sit down with a property owner to have these conversations, because you want to demonstrate that you are accessible and a resource. Next question or slide. A big takeaway there is that sometimes the best path forward for a potential property owner is no path forward. And that's a hard one because not everything is a win. As Liz mentioned, sometimes properties go through several property owners before they're redeveloped. It's important to know when to discourage a potential property owner from purchasing a property or a legacy property owner from holding on to the property. So if they have funds to purchase the building, but don't have the funding to invest in the building, it might not be a win right now. If they have a plan to sit on the building indefinitely until they begin to work towards a future dream of one day owning a fill-in-the-blank hobby business, but have no experience in that business, it might be time to talk them out of that. And you're not just talking them out of that for the good of downtown, which yes, is important. You're also talking them out of it for their own good. And they need to feel that from you in that scenario, because it's never a good scenario for someone to be property poor and stuck under, you know, a dream that might be unattainable for them. So your message shouldn't be no, never, or any kind of like harsh criticism, but more so something softer and delivered more gently, like, I worry that this might not be good timing for this investment for you. There's opportunities that pop up downtown. Let's continue this conversation and stay in touch. And I'm going to look for something that might be a good fit for what it is you're wanting to do. And that's about building relationships and building trust is an important part of the conversation. Next slide. Your main message to property owners that you meet with, or potential property owners or investors, people with a dream of owning a piece of downtown, is that a building is a business. I think sometimes as local leaders, we tend to focus on wanting to recruit the right business, and we may forget that the building themselves are also a business within your downtown district. And so the building is a business, even if the building is vacant. It might be a failing business if it's vacant because it's not generating any income. So to set a building business up for success to attract a high quality tenant, the property owner must invest in and maintain their building. I think they'll understand the notion that they're going to get what they pay for. Good businesses know the space where their business is located directly reflects their sales and influences their bottom line. The best business recruitment tool that you can have in your downtown is continually reactivating stagnant properties in your downtown district. You can't recruit an anchor tenant or a transformative business and expect them to occupy a dilapidated, vacant building. So what are quality tenants looking for? They're looking for a white boxed turnkey space with good curb appeal and character and accessibility. They're not looking for a dilapidated building that has potential and good bones. They typically don't start looking for a space until 1 to 3 months before they're ready to open, Most businesses are not, experienced businesses are not looking for a space, you know, a year out where they're expected to invest significant funds in the building itself. So what's your role here? Your role is to encourage and facilitate the redevelopment of high quality spaces so that you can then promote those high quality spaces, which will attract the kinds of businesses that you want in your community. I also think, in listening to what Janice was saying, that your building as a business message is a message for the stubborn or unwilling property owner as well. They need to understand that they have an untapped asset, and their business, that is that asset, is failing when it's close to condemnation. Next slide. So the big takeaway there, I know I'm really hammering this point home, is to focus on small developer recruitment and assistance first before business recruitment. That's the big takeaway. You aren't likely to recruit a brewery looking for 3,000 square feet in your downtown district to a building that needs 200,000 in upfits with a property owner unwilling to invest in that property. So what you need to do is identify the properties where investment is most likely to happen, or and the properties where that investment is most likely to happen are the properties that are about to change hands or have recently changed hands. And that's where your first wins will come from. Next slide. So let's look at a real example. This is Mount Airy because I have the most before and after pictures of Mount Airy. The photo on the left is a building in Mount Airy prior to redevelopment. Upstairs was vacant and used for storage. Downstairs was an insurance office with one full-time employee and one part-time employee. The insurance office was planning to close due to the owner's health. When it closed, if no work was done to the building, what kind of business do you think would have filled that space? No doubt it would have been something low impact, like a consignment shop or something that didn't last. Mount Airy, instead of focusing on recruiting a business to this space and expecting the business to invest in the space, focused on facilitating the redevelopment of the building ahead of recruiting the business. The building is now a sushi restaurant with 2 residential units upstairs. It supports 6 full-time jobs and 25 part-time positions. Mount Airy leaned into the Main Street Rural Planning Center services to gain free design assistance. So if you're a Main Street community, that is a service available to you, or your community might consider creating a program like Kaylin mentioned, offering schematic designs and renderings as well. Mount Airy also created a local resource team that really gathered around the current property owner and then mentored the new property owner through the historic tax credit process. The project was supported monetarily only with a facade grant of $2,000. So really it was that resource support in terms of the team around them, which is what shepherded this project to the finish line. If the building had stayed the same, the property owner might have rented that main floor for anywhere from $500 to $700 a month to a low impact business generating no income upstairs. And now that it's been redeveloped, the main floor restaurant space is owner occupied, but if it was rented out or leased out, it would rent for approximately $2,500 to maybe $3,000 a month. And the studio residential units upstairs now rent for $650 a month. So you can see there that there's a big economic impact within the envelope of this building, and the property owner treats the building like a business. Next slide. Let's consider the economic impact of this project beyond the envelope of that building. This is on a street called Franklin Street, where there was little to no activity and a lot of vacant buildings prior to Kazaku being redeveloped. The project spurred all of the neighboring properties on Franklin Street to begin to invest in their properties like a true domino effect. They were supported with small supplemental local grants like facade grants and mural grants. for less than $10,000 in public funds. So far, 1.9 million in private investment has happened on this street, in addition to new jobs, new businesses, and new activity on the street. So when you focus on building redevelopment as a business recruitment tool, each project is going to be a catalyst for another. Next slide. So how do you know if a project is going to generate a good return on the investment? You can apply the rule of 5. And I learned this from a mentor and friend of mine, Gene Reese. These are actual examples of his projects. I'm sorry that it's kind of out of whack there. But the rule of 5 is a project pro forma that takes the estimated annual rent over 5 years and deducts that from the total acquisition and rehab costs. So if the project produces a net income in 5 years, it costs out, meaning it's a worthwhile investment. We'll walk through this project just a little bit. The price of the building, $50,000, cost of the rehab, $100,000. So the total building cost and rehab cost is actually only $110 because historic tax credits were applied, meaning the rehab cost was only $60,000 because there's a 40% tax credit for the qualified rehab expenses. Monthly rent generates $2,000 a month or $24,000 annually. So you times that rent, the annual rent, by 5, and you get a net income of $10,000. So the ROI on that is approximately 9%. Typically, a good ROI is anything above 10%. But when you take into consideration that this project will be a catalyst project for the next, and it's in the black and not in the red, it's still a good investment. Next slide. All right, rule of 5 again, example number 2. This one's an even better project costing out. Price of the building, $175,000. Rehabilitation cost $300,000, ends up being only $180,000 because of the historic tax credits. The total building acquisition cost and rehab cost is $355,000. Monthly rent is $7,600. There's 2 units there. $91,200 per year. You times that rent by 5 years, the net income is $101,000. So it's a good investment. This is a healthy business, the envelope of the building. Next project. And then we're going to look at one where the project does not cost out. Building cost $160,000, rehab cost $200,000. That equates to $120,000 because of the tax credits. Total building and rehab cost $280,000. Monthly rent is $3,000 from 2 different units, or $36,000 per year. The rent over 5 years brings in $180,000, so it's a loss of $100,000. The project does not cost out in that equation. I think what the key factor that made this project not cost out is that the building cost was too high, and you will see that a lot in historic main streets. What do you do about that? You don't encourage the owner to charge a higher rent because the business will fail or they will not be able to fill the space. That's where it's so important for the local leader to insert themselves with the property owners before the acquisition happens. When they know a property owner is thinking of selling their building, that's where the feet on the street and really making those relationships is important, because there's an education process that needs to happen with property owners, legacy property owners that are considering selling their building. If they want double tax value for it, they are setting up the next building owner for failure, even with historic tax credits. And so I think the message there is to let property owners know that they need to set their legacy up for success. And even showing them a pro forma before they sell the building could be important. Next slide. The big takeaway from all 3 of these examples is that without historic tax credits, none of these examples would generate a return. And historic tax credits is a whole nother webinar. And fortunately, you have the opportunity to sign up for the NC Main Street Conference in Goldsboro, because we will be talking about tax credits. You should definitely contact the State Historic Preservation Office to learn more about historic tax credits because it is the single best incentive available to encourage investment in downtown districts. Next slide. So how do you keep building that momentum? Once you've had those conversations, it's ongoing work. The work is never done. You stay connected, you build your team, and you work on it one project at a time, identifying where your wins are most likely going to happen first. So you're going to cultivate relationships with property owners. You want them to believe in the vision and mission of your organization. You want them to participate in the growth of your downtown and bring them on board literally into your downtown development groups. Then you want to facilitate mentorships between property owners. As you build those relationships, you ask a property owner who has completed a redevelopment project to grab, oops, I meant grab coffee, not grab property. Sorry, grab coffee with a potential property owner to grow the team. And then you want to keep going first, keep being a resource, keep pursuing the vision and strategic plan. This isn't just about constantly pursuing private development. There need to be public projects that change the visible look of your downtown so that people continue to have that confidence that the public sector is a stable partner. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Lizzie. Paige, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Liz and Lizzie, we have a question for Janice again about social environment and networking. So Janice, you've had a number of properties that have recently changed hands in Hertford. So what role has the town played in painting the picture of how each property contributes to the town's vitality?
Well, taking off of some of what Lizzie has brought out, we have had properties that we have not necessarily been able to, we haven't been on the inside of the exchange. So people have gone directly to property owners and purchased it from them. And as a matter of fact, the same individual I was speaking about with the gas station, once we perked his interest in Hertford again, he bought 3 more properties downtown, basically, that right now are sitting and nothing is happening with them. We are in a very advantageous position, though, with one of our businesses downtown, which is a pretty large area. It's not a stagnant operation, though. Liz and the others on the call will know it's the hub. The owner has decided that she does want to sell and has had the wherewithal to invite certain of us to a luncheon. All women, town manager, Main Street manager, the chair of the Economic Vitality Committee, Chamber of Commerce, invited us to a luncheon at her house before she announced to anyone else, even her employees, that she was going to sell the business, to let us know. So we have an opportunity, and it really is going to be incumbent upon us to get in the middle of the sale as far as prospective buyers and what they can offer. It's a location that we don't have much of a downtown in Hertford. We really might, I wouldn't even say 2 blocks, maybe a block and a half, really. And this particular location with a 24-foot frontage could be more than what it is. It's basically a hub. It's a UPS, FedEx sort of drop store that does a lot of printing and so on. And even in maintaining that space or that business within that space, the space could be used for a lot more. So this is something that we need to be talking to the owner about, and also working to see what we can do to be able to get a business in there that is going to be viable, but could even do more as far as what it offers to help enhance our downtown. But I think what's clear to all of us in Hertford is that our downtown is everybody's business. So the spaces that we do have vacant, everybody is looking for somebody to fill those spaces. Everybody is looking for restaurants to come to Hertford. Everybody is looking for whatever type of store they seem to like. Often not necessarily within the strategic plan that we're working on, but very much aware that it's to our advantage to fill these vacant spaces with businesses that are going to help us move forward. And perhaps to the greatest extreme, again, because we do have such limited space, we have an annex building that's houses our one of our courtrooms, as well as our sheriff's department, probation department, and so on. And I've gone so far as to speak to our town council and our manager about moving that out of our downtown to a justice center and being able to have that building and all the parking that is behind it as retail space that again would help our downtown. So yeah, we're really in it as far as the community and the environment. We also have individuals who are not shy about reaching out to some of the business owners, asking them when are they going to do something about their business. You have to be careful that you don't get to the point where you antagonize the owners, but you know, some of the individuals have just chosen to do it on their own and communicate with them on a regular basis about, you know, what's going on, when are you going to start doing something on your building? One of our buildings that was recently purchased, it's a part of a whole complex of buildings really that covers a square block that was recently purchased, was a theater. You know, probably a beautiful building. The inside is something really fascinating to see. And it does have a sentimental value because for those who have grown up here, they remember when they attended that theater, and who has purchased it and has an interest in rehabbing it, or some of them are individuals who grew up here. And so they have a sentimental attachment to that building and do want to see it move. The issue, of course, is they got the money together to buy the building. The question now is getting the money together to do all of the rehabilitation that will be needed. Clearly, well, I shouldn't say clearly, they know that they want to rehab the theater, but they really don't have a very clear vision as to what they can do in there that is going to be financially feasible. They talked about dinner theater, they talked about many things, but so far I don't think they have gotten the numbers to add up. So there's work to be done there. We introduced them to the possibility of a U.S. Department of Commerce Hope 6 grant that maybe they could get together and work on, but they didn't bite that. So as a community, we continue to reach out, and like I say, there's a lot of peer pressure put on them by people who they know in the community to go ahead and do something with the buildings that they have. But we do see it as everybody's business, that the business downtown is everybody's business. And sometimes that's good. And sometimes you wonder if it's so good, but it's important. And as long as everybody buys in, we'll just continue to see how we can get these buildings to be what we want our downtown to be.
Thank you, Janice. Sometimes that peer pressure or that outside influence can go a long way. So it's great that your general public is interested in helping move things forward downtown. All right, Liz.
And
let's wrap up.
We're getting close to the end here, but Robert, I believe you have a graph of all of the tools that we've shared today. Is that correct? There we go.
It's wonderful. Liz, you guys have done a great job. Participating in this, it feels like another conference, Main Street conference, where even though you've been 10 years in a row, you learn something every time. I've taken 2 screenshots and saved it to a hard drive folder that for our upcoming board goal setting session. So yeah, I'm learning today as well.
That's great.
Yeah, this to me is there's a lot of variables that go into this, and it can get sometimes overwhelming. To me, it's helpful to put it in a linear order and kind of take it one step at a time. And you guys have done this graphic here, which I do, in my opinion, shows the natural process of everything we've been talking about today. Starting with good data gathering. So, it wouldn't make sense in going to the next step if you don't have all the data you've gathered to develop a vision and eventually propose some ordinances and take some actions. Without this good data, it's going to be hard to proceed to the next step. So with good data, you can move into the visioning process, showing the current condition and status of buildings as contrasted to what they can be. And then consequently, it'd be difficult to ask the town council or the board to invest without a solid, well thought out vision that's appropriate to your town and size. Based on the vision, the supporting data and investment from the town, then you can move into developing some suitable ordinances. It really wouldn't make sense to start drafting ordinances without this prior work. You probably get into like a constant loop, making revisions and edits and spinning your wheels. Out of this ordinance development process comes some carrot and stick incentives and deterrents that give your ordinance teeth, but also grease the wheels for development. These carrots and incentives tend to diffuse citizen objection and make these final steps more acceptable. Those final steps being implementing and mastering the property management process and engaging the community. So again, to me, this linear approach makes order out of chaos, and it organizes it in a way that makes it useful to bring all these variables together.
Robert, thanks so much. And, I'll close by saying we have some additional training opportunities that I want to make sure everyone's aware of. First of all, the North Carolina Main Street Conference will be in Goldsboro, March 12th through the 14th. It is the largest statewide downtown revitalization conference in the country, and we hope that everybody that's on the call today will join us in Goldsboro. But in addition to that, beginning in April, we will be doing some small-scale developer training programs in each of the 8 prosperity zones around the state, one about every 6 weeks. We don't quite have that schedule worked out, but we will have that out soon. We're doing that in collaboration with the State Historic Preservation Office, and the intent is to help developers that are interested in doing 1 or maybe 2 buildings in a downtown understand the tools that they have available, particularly the historic tax credit program. So that will be a full day training, and will promise to be exceptional for those new developers that are trying to get into rehabbing business. I think the quote of the day was Lizzie's quote, which is treat your building like a business and make sure that you're activating it. Folks, thank you all so much for being with us today. I'd like to thank Robert Davey, Town of Warrenton, Janice Cole, the Town of Hertford, Alice Butler, the Mayor, the Town of Roseboro, Kaylin Horn, the Economic Development Director with the City of Lenoir, and Lizzie Morrison on our team, the Community Economic Development Planner for the Piedmont Triad region, and of course my co-moderator, Paige Hicks, our Main Street Program Specialist up in Newland. And of course, thank you to Uplift for hosting this wonderful webinar today.